America in the last years of the 19th century, when he was 9 years old. His name then was Asa Joelson. His language was Yiddish. He lost his mother in the first year of his American life, struggled against a strict father immured in the ways of the old country, and then, within about 15 years, had become the most famous and highly paid popular entertainer in America. He was the biggest star of musical theater, on Broadway and in the dozens and dozens of other places he played across the country. In 1927, he starred in a movie about Jews, The Jazz Singer, made by the Jews who created Hollywood but who rarely made movies about Jews, that became a national sensation. Its main themes, drawn from Joelson's own life, were generational difference, the conflict between father and son, tradition and modernity, freedom and obligation, and it struck a chord. It was a Jewish movie, complete with authentic-looking synagogue scenes and the chanting of Hebrew prayers, and though it played in an America that still stoked many of the ancient hatreds, Henry Ford's anti-Semitic newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, for example, had the second highest daily circulation in the country, it crossed over to all races and creeds. Gentiles of all varieties saw something poignantly, universally meaningful in its main themes, and it made Joelson, the poor boy from Lithuania, even richer and more famous. Is there any other country where that could have happened? Perhaps on an individual level. There were fortunes made by Jews in England, Germany, and France, celebrities like Sarah Bernhardt, writers like Marcel Proust, bankers like the Baron de Rothschild, medical scientists like Sigmund Freud, political leaders like Leon Blum and Walter Rathenau, and, to go back to an earlier generation, Benjamin Disraeli. But what a figure like Joelson and a movie like The Jazz Singer represented is the mass nature of this kind of occurrence. Asa Joelson / Al Jolson was part of a cohort of entertainers whose roots were in the Russian Empire and who came nearly to dominate American popular culture, remaking themselves and remaking the country in the process. It's hard to imagine anything like that happening any place but in these United States of America. Perhaps a personal note, the only one you'll find in this book, would be apt here. Like Asa Joelson, my father, Herschel Bernstein, a.k.a. Herb, was born in the Pale of Settlement, that zone of territory, much of which is no longer part of Russia, where Jews were once allowed to live in the Russian Empire, even as they were persecuted, excluded from the universities and the liberal professions, and subject to the all-too-common spasms of murder, pillage, and vandalism known as pogroms. Herschel escaped under a pile of hay in a wagon that crossed the border into Poland in 1920. He arrived in New York in 1922 and lived in Corona, Queens, at the very end of the mass immigration of huddling masses from Eastern Europe. My father fought bitterly with his father, a deeply orthodox man whom I imagine to be something like Al Jolson's father, and many other fathers who came to America to preserve the traditional Jewish way of life and were disappointed in sons who wanted to forge something new and different. The fights between my father and his father became so violent that my father was sent away to a Jewish farm school in Pennsylvania, so that, as my grandmother used to tell me, the two wouldn't kill each other in their mutual fury and disillusionment. Then, my grandfather died, leaving my father, about 20 years old, liberated in a way, but also burdened with guilt over his refusal to live up to his father's expectations.